Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us on this first Sunday in June. I hope you're looking forward to a great day. And speaking of June, for more than 75 years, we've celebrated dairy and all of its goodness during this month. What started out as National Milk Month in 1937 to promote milk consumption has turned into a month-long celebration that acknowledges the dairy industry's contributions to the United States and around the world. We have the perfect guest lined up to talk about dairy, and that conversation starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, John Gilbert grew up as a kid working on his parents' dairy farm. He spent decades in the dairy business here in Upper Michigan and established the largest dairy company in the region. He sold Gilbert Dairy about 9 years ago, but has maintained a continuing interest in the company and the industry. Today we're going to talk about the dairy business, including some reminiscing to help us understand what it means to the UP and how we get to where we are today. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Really nice to have you with us. You know, in a sense, one thing we may have kind of in common. I've kind of watched the television industry grow. I didn't start here in the first day, but I was a kid watching, so I got to see the evolution. You weren't quite there when the dairy industry began to evolve, but pretty close.
Right.
And yes. Your family, when did they start in the dairy business?
In 1937, on a farm in Lake Linden.
Okay. You know, and back in those days, it was pretty much a farmer and his cows providing milk for a few neighbors, right?
Yes. Well, what they did, the farmer would bottle milk by hand in glass bottles and haul it to town.
Okay.
And they would either trade for goods and services or they sold it. And in 1948, I think it was, the state changed the rules that you could not sell raw milk anymore.
Okay.
So my parents built a little plant next to the farm, and they bought the proper equipment to pasteurize milk.
Okay.
And then we were taking the milk in from the neighboring farms.
Okay.
And we were delivering to stores and restaurants at that time in the Lake Linden area.
And that's really the way the whole dairy industry grew.
Evolved, yes.
You know, you went from farmers supplying some people to farmers going to a central group, a central company, and them doing the distribution.
Yeah, that's where we started. So.
You know, I can again remember as a kid here in Marquette County, names like the Bancroft Dairy, Northern Dairy,
Hillcrest.
Henderson, Hillcrest, and I assume you had the same kind of thing going on all around the UP.
In 1960, I think there was like 59 dairies operating, of every shape and size throughout the Upper Peninsula.
Okay.
There's 59 operating companies, because I have some of the records from the organization was called UP Dairy Manufacturers Association. It's interesting to go back and read all the different names and the history there. So.
And one of the big reasons for that happening was this pasteurization, the fact that if you're going to supply milk, you've got to meet certain standards.
Well, yes.
The farmer couldn't do that.
No, they weren't. No, they can't. They're not supposed to sell raw milk.
They didn't have the equipment to do it.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the way the milk products have changed over the years.
Right.
You know, when I was a kid, every kid drank, I think we called it homogenized milk back then, but it was whole milk.
Whole milk, yeah. Yes, that was how it started off, whole milk. And then they went to homogenized, where it broke up the fat, so it was not, you never had the cream line anymore.
Okay, that's right, okay.
And pretty soon you had 2%. And now you have 1%. And in some areas you got 0.5%.
Oh, really?
And then you got skim milk, which is 0.5% fat.
But it's really changed, hasn't it?
Oh,
isn't skim milk today kind of like the most popular?
It's one of the top ones, yes.
Okay.
And the most popular skim milk month is January. Everybody after Christmas goes to skim milk.
Okay, it's that resolution to maybe change
I guess
something?
so. Yeah, just.
You know, I can, again, thinking back as a kid, you know, nobody wanted to drink skim milk, and it even seemed like it had a different color to it. It was like a blue color or blue tint or something.
When the skim milk was a waste product, back when the farmers used to have their own separator on the farm, well, they would separate the milk and get the cream, and they would ship the cream off to be made into butter if they weren't selling the milk somewhere. And the skim milk went to feed calves or pigs.
Okay.
It was a waste product.
Okay. And that's important, I think, for people to understand. The milk coming out of the cow is pretty much milk.
Yes.
Every dairy product we get comes from that milk in some
Right.
way or another.
Yes.
And so back in those days, as you say, it was taken for cream or ice cream or butter or whatever
Oh, yeah.
it might be.
Yeah.
And the
It
skim
was
milk
interesting to see how I have a collection of bottles and different memorabilia, but I got cream cans that they used to put on the railroad that when the trains came through, the farms would bring the cans of cream to the railroad station, and one of the places was Duluth, Minnesota. That the cream cans went on from all the way from Eben and Chatham. They would go to Duluth, Minnesota on a train. And each can has a little brass tag with the farmer's name and the railroad name on it.
Okay.
So it's kind of fascinating to see how they transported product.
And so the evolution of skim milk being a popular drinking milk, that had to be a boon for the dairy industry.
Yes, because it's and then the cream is a desirable product because it's used in ice cream and butter.
Right.
It has its own separate. It makes more available for that. So.
How did Gilbert Dairy become the last man standing?
I'm not sure. I guess.
Well, I think you had something to do with it.
Well, I'd like to say we try hard. You know, we try hard, and we've always tried harder, I guess, and a lot of different reasons. In 1984, you know, we were located in Calumet, Michigan, and it's a great area, but we're very limited as far as growth goes. Being up in the tip of the Keweenaw, we were limited as far as supply. There was fewer and fewer farmers. We were bringing milk in to our plant in Calumet. Milk was coming all the way from Menominee County to supply our needs. Then we're shipping it, turnaround processing it, and shipping it out. We covered the copper country, but then we were shipping it out more into Marquette area, but it was hard to grow anymore being in the location we were because of the distance. Milk is refrigerated. You can't transport it all that many miles, but then it doesn't become efficient. So back in 1984, I made a decision to move the dairy to Marquette, the center of the Upper Peninsula, the center of the dairy supply, and that probably what helped us continue to grow.
Certainly a key move. We've got to take a break. I'll pick up right where we left off. Back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Our guest this morning is John Gilbert, who was for many years associated with Gilbert Dairy and still is, for that matter.
Yes.
You're still actively involved with the company?
Right, yep.
Giving him advice?
Well, I don't know about that, but I don't have to go if I don't want to, but I want to. Okay. So it makes a difference. I'm trying to get more have-tos or more want-tos in my life than have-tos.
Okay. You know, we were talking about how things changed, and we had 70 dairies, and
yes,
and eventually Gilbert Dairy was the last one standing.
Yeah.
Did you acquire some other dairies in that process? Or?
We did along the way. One in Ontonagon, yes, and then one in Scandia was Gauthier Dairy in Scandia. Other than that, and then Pollard Dairy over in Norway.
Okay. Now, as you know, dairies were consolidating. Were the dairy farms doing that as well, and are they still doing that?
Not so much consolidating, but some of the small farms, they either got bigger or they just got out of business.
Okay.
You know, maybe the next generation didn't want to be a farmer,
okay,
and that's understandable. But the farms that are there today are bigger than they were. They've all grown.
Okay, so the supply is still there?
The supply is pretty much still there.
Okay.
We bring in milk now from the entire Upper Peninsula. From far east is Pickford and Sault Ste. Marie area, Engadine, Manistee area, down into Menominee County, Chatham and Eben. We go far east. I think Ewan is the farthest west that there's a farm. And that milk comes to Marquette, and all the milk that's in the copper country comes to Marquette. So.
Before we get back to what's happening today, a couple other things from the past. The evolution of packaging had to make a difference,
Yes.
from the glass bottles to the cardboard to the...
We went to glass bottles, then we went to wax paper cartons.
Right.
And the next thing was plastic coated paper cartons and then plastic jugs.
Okay.
And that's the biggest product. That's the bulk of the milk is sold in gallon plastic jugs and half-gallon jugs.
Only a few of us still remember that it used to come in glass bottles.
Oh yeah, yep.
And that the milkman used to deliver it.
Oh yes, yep.
Why do you think that why did the milkman come to be? You know, it was the only really product that was delivered like that, kind of on a daily basis.
Well, but the milkman sometimes, he used to deliver bread and other things too, groceries, like the Jewel tea truck.
Okay.
They used to do other things too, but I'm not sure. I think people ate more at home back then, so they probably drank more milk.
Okay. So there was a lot of home delivery back then.
Yes.
Okay, so you made a decision about 9-10 years ago that you were going to sell the dairy.
Yes.
And so, first of all, why did you make that decision?
Well, as we build up a business, you start to think down the road, what are you going to do with it? You know, what do you do? What if something happened to me or my son's involved? And we made a decision that maybe to partner up with somebody or to sell to somebody else that, you know, that would be a good fit for us, you know, to continue what we've have going and still be able to, you know, maintain the product. And we did that with Dean Foods. It was Country Fresh in Grand Rapids was the company we partnered up with.
Okay.
They had distribution to some of the major chains, and that's another thing that's changed in our industry. There's more and more products sold in major outlets, and a major chain store does not want to necessarily deal with a small regional company. They want to deal with somebody that covers a few states or you know, and that's why we could see that coming. Even some of the institutions like hospitals and nursing homes, we deal with a buying group 5 states away on some of the nursing home and hospital contracts that we have. You know, so it's interesting how the market's changed.
Okay.
There's fewer and fewer small stores and restaurants.
So it's one of those things, like in so many cases, you'd like to stay the way you are, but you can't.
But you can't.
You know,
It's just
world is
the way it
changing.
is.
The world is
Do we
changing.
like change? Not always, but we can't just sit there and let the world go by. You know. So.
Right. Okay. Got to take one more break. Back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Again, we're talking with John Gilbert. And John, we were talking about the fact that you had sold Gilbert Dairy, which was the last really UP dairy, to Dean Foods. But when you made that decision, you knew that this was a dairy that was going to keep operations here, right?
Yes.
In fact,
We hope that, you know, and it continues yet today. And we continue to do more things at the dairy. Our volume continues to increase. And I think Dean Foods has 70+ plants throughout the country, located in every state, and we consistently rank. We're probably the smallest operation that they have, but we consistently rank in the top 5 as far as quality, sanitation, safety, all the things that are a credit to our employees. It makes us feel good, you know that.
sure.
And you think productivity, and that's a big thing when you're just a tiny plant.
Right.
So I guess we did it right along the way there. So
That's great. You know, let's talk about the economic impact of that too. I think they have about 70 employees or so.
yes, that's a small part of it. We probably take in milk from 70+ farmers.
Okay.
Some of them are 2 and 3 families. I think our farm payroll will run between $15 and $20 million a year. You know, people talk about farm sustainability. I often think, who better exemplifies that than Gilbert Dairy? These are farms. This is the amount of money that we put into the farm economy in the Upper Peninsula.
Right.
That's a huge amount. I don't think anybody else can say that.
No, and it really
And
is.
it's a home for their milk. It's a home for that farmer.
I was going to say, it really is a partnership, isn't it? Between
yes.
the
Oh, yeah,
the
it is.
dairy
Yep.
distributor
Yes.
and
Yep.
the people producing it. One of the advantages, I think, in being with Dean is they do keep some private labels.
Yes, they keep their own labels that are common in the marketplace,
Okay.
that are important in the marketplace. Now they've come out with a new, I call it a unifying label. Throughout the country, every one of their plants has, like in our market, it's Gilbert's, but it says Dairy Pure. And the Dairy Pure signifies a higher standard that they've come out with that each plant has to comply with. As far as sanitation and quality, things like that. So you'll see the Dairy Pure on the label, but you'll also see the Gilbert label.
And you're also, this plant is now also supplying some milk downstate, I believe, too, isn't it?
Down along, we go into the northern part of Wisconsin and then down into the northern part of lower Michigan.
Okay. And some of that's sold under a different label as part of Dean
It
Foods?
could be, yes. It could be, yes. But most of it is our own label.
Okay. Okay. John, you've been involved in business for a lot of years here in the UP. A lot of challenge. You know, it's interesting to me that you go back 100 years and the UP population never changes.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
and it's a constant struggle. And now here, I know you've been involved with other companies. You've been on bank boards. You know, here Empire Mine is closing. We've got to find some replacements for that. You know, what do you see as opportunities for the future up here? What do we have to do?
Well, you look at, I don't know. I think we just keep plugging away. We got, now you got little breweries popping up that are being very successful. I constantly see younger people coming up with newer ideas, and I think that's pretty good. You know, it's different things.
As you look back on the decisions you had to make with Gilbert Dairy, are you comfortable with?
Very comfortable. Yeah, I'm. Back when we moved the dairy from Calumet to Marquette, you know, we had probably a lot of people thinking we lost off our rocker here, but I look back and I never once did I ever think that we didn't make the right decision or give up on it, and it turned out well. So,
you know, and I think people in a lot of businesses have to do that. You know, we think, well, the dairy business is the dairy business. It doesn't change, but obviously it's changed.
It changes.
Tremendously.
It's constantly changing.
And
I guess I'd like to think that we changed. We continued to change along the way.
Okay. What's the most popular milk product today?
Chocolate.
Chocolate milk. You know,
that's an easy one.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, I grew up drinking whole milk, but if I had to do it now, I don't think I could do that.
I couldn't drink whole milk.
No, so.
But it's changed, right?
Okay. Anyway, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
You've had a great career. And,
it's been
it's been
no
important,
regrets by any means.
Not just to you, but to the Upper Peninsula. It's been jobs for people, and not just in the dairy, but.
But we feel good about what we did and what we accomplished, you know.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us this morning.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. The other day I was surfing the internet looking for information about National Dairy Month and came across a blog from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They pointed out that we celebrate many unusual observances in June, such as Heimlich Maneuver Day, National Yo-Yo Day, and National Donut Day. And they go on to point out, but who can enjoy a donut without a nice cold glass of milk? I think they're laying it on a little thick, but I do enjoy a good donut with a glass of milk. There were a couple of other items that caught my eye as I continued to search the net for more Dairy Month info. One thing I learned is that the United States has too much cheese. Just a couple of weeks ago, I reported that Venezuela had suffered shortages of a number of things, including beer and toilet paper. And here we sit with too much cheese. What a great country we live in. How did this come about? Apparently it's a combination of cheese imports at an all-time high and domestic production on the rise. According to Bloomberg, at the end of March, cheese and butter inventories in the U.S. reached their highest levels in 30 years, and we're sitting on a 1.2 billion pound stockpile of cheese. That sounds like a big pile of cheese. But that wasn't all I found on my trip around the internet. The food experts are constantly turning our world upside down. Like other kids, I grew up drinking what we now call whole milk, milk with all the fat in it. It normally comes with regularly. Very few of us drank skim milk, which back in those days seemed to have a strange blue tint to it. For me and for a lot of other people, switching to non-fat skim milk was not an easy transition, but we finally did it because it was good for our health. Or was it? It seems that a couple of recent studies have concluded that consuming whole-fat dairy is linked to reduced body fat. In one paper published by Swedish researchers, over a period of 12 years, middle-aged men who consumed high-fat milk, butter, and cream were significantly less likely to become obese compared with men who never or rarely ate high-fat dairy. Interestingly enough, no one seems to really know why. They speculate about some possible reasons, but at this point they just seem to be guessing. My advice is that you should not rush out and chug down a quart of whole milk yet. If these things go the way they often do, we will likely have more reports that just make it even more confusing for us. The other thing to consider is that these studies seem to deal with the issue of the role of whole milk in reducing obesity, but don't really address the question of dairy, cholesterol, and heart disease. On the other hand, whether it's healthy or not, go out and eat some cheese. We have too much in this country. It's our civic duty to help deal with this crisis of an overabundance of cheese in America. We need to do something before we're completely overrun with cheese. I'll be back in 2 minutes. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with John Gilbert this morning. John has a lot of interesting knowledge and history of the UP dairy industry, and I'm glad he was willing to share that story with us. Remember, if you want to watch it again or recommend it to someone else, it is available on the internet. Go to uppermichigansource.com, click on the navigation icon, those 3 little bars near the upper left corner of your screen, and scroll down to the Ryan Report tab. The most recent show is usually available starting on Monday afternoon. If you have thoughts you want to share with us, you can drop an email to dryan@wluctv6.com. Today's show is coming up next. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll plan to be with us again next Sunday morning.